Alrighty, our recording has begun. Welcome everyone to our webinar on Outlook Reimagined, Mastering the New Experience. My name is Katie Badeau. I am an instructional design and training specialist here at Element Technologies. I have been working with the Microsoft Office suite for many years now, and so I am quite familiar with these tools. We are going to be using Teams for today's course. So somewhere on your screen, you should see a toolbar that looks like this. I ask that you keep yourself muted unless you are actively speaking, just to prevent any background noise on our recording. You can take yourself on and off of mute using the microphone button here in the Teams toolbar. You can also send questions in the chat window if you prefer, using the speech bubble button here on the Teams toolbar. Now, this session is designed for people who already use Outlook and want to get comfortable with this version, and that is new Outlook, of course. So we're going to keep this focused on new Outlook in this session. We'll talk about what's changed, if things have moved, if things are looking a little different, and how to make it work for you. If you do have access to New Outlook, feel free to follow along with me as we go through the session. You can sort of switch over, try a few settings, and see how it feels as we walk through the tool. So here we have our agenda for today's session. We're going to start off by talking about how you can make the new switch to, how you can make the switch to New Outlook, what's new and what's changed. We'll talk about how to navigate around. It should feel fairly familiar, but there are a few pieces that kind of throw folks off when they initially make that change. I'll show you some options for adjusting your settings to customize your experience. And then we'll look through some email, calendar, and search tools and kind of just explore some of those options as well. At the end of the session, we'll leave some time for Q&A. So if you do have specific questions about New Outlook that you would like to review or that you've run into as you have been using the tool, we will have some time to discuss those things towards the end of the session. Alrighty. Now, one thing that I want to show you just right off the bat is how to get into New Outlook. Let's start with how to move between these versions. Now, one thing that Microsoft has done is they have given you this toggle in the upper right corner of your window that allows you to turn New Outlook on and off. This is really nice because you can go in there, you can try some of the processes. If you're looking for certain tools or you're needing to just kind of get back into old Outlook, classic Outlook, excuse me. If you need to get back into classic Outlook to work in an environment you're a little more familiar with, you can just toggle it right back over and it will take you back to classic Outlook. So if you're clicking along with me, go ahead and toggle on that option. That will take us into New Outlook down at the bottom of the screen. You'll notice that the icon looks a little bit different. It's still an Outlook icon. It's still kind of that little blue envelope. Really, the New Outlook icon is mostly kind of rounded around the edges. So that's how I can tell the difference is that the new icon is a little bit smoother around the corners specifically. So at a high level, the biggest changes are in our layout and where things live. In Classic Outlook, many of us are familiar with having buttons to switch between our calendar, our mail, and our contacts down here at the bottom of our folder pane. That's where a lot of folks are used to kind of getting to those various different tools. In New Outlook, those buttons have been shifted to the left side of the screen. So you'll see that some of these options should look familiar It takes you straight into your mail right to start off with. So you are, of course, looking at your inbox. We have the calendar icon that switches us over to our calendar, and then some shortcuts that it thinks we will use. So things like Copilot, our to-do list, and we can kind of flip around between these options here. Now, one thing that I find really helpful if you're new to New Outlook is to actually label these little options on the left so you know what you're looking at. So one way that you can apply those um, labels to those icons there on the left is to open up your settings. So our settings are available in the upper right corner of our window, sort of up by where we've got our minimize, our maximize, and our close buttons. You will see this settings gear. Now, when it comes to customizing New Outlook for your personal experience, this is going to be a good button to be able to make those adjustments to New Outlook. So I'll go ahead and click on Settings. And it's going to bring up a bunch of different settings I can adjust. Let's see here. I believe it's under Appearance. Ah, yes, okay. So you're going to click into Settings. You'll click on General here on the left, and then you'll select Appearance. That gives you some cool options for, adjusting things like light mode and dark mode. But down at the bottom, it also gives you this toggle for your navigation bar. And one of those little toggles is Show App Names. So you can go ahead, toggle that on. Again, we went to Settings, General, and then Appearance gives us an option on the bottom to show app names on our navigation bar, and I'll click Save. I'll go ahead and close out of my settings window to show you what that looks like. So now these icons here on the left do have little labels, so I'm not just kind of trying to guess what the icons mean. That's a matter of preference, but I find that when you're making the transition into New Outlook, it's a nice feature to be able to tell what's going on here on the left. A few other things have changed in New Outlook. This toolbar is a little bit more streamlined. Our settings are more, kind of condensed. They're in one place. In Classic Outlook, you had a lot of settings split between various dialog boxes, or you had to go through the ribbon to get to those settings. So they've sort of consolidated them here in New Outlook using that settings icon. The core tools are all still here. You're just going to be getting to them a little bit differently. And as we go through, I'll continue to point out features that tend to be helpful in day-to-day. Let's continue getting oriented with our layout. So from left to right, you'll see your app navigation, clicking between mail, calendar, and these other tools that we just got the labels added to. You do have your folders here on the left. This is where you'll traditionally see them in Classic Outlook. You can expand them out. So if you did want to set up, your favorited items, you can go ahead and customize that as well here. Then you're going to have your message list in the center. The placement may be a little bit different than what you're used to in Classic Outlook, and it does default to conversation view, which not everyone is used to or prefers. So if you like conversation view, it's usually kind of a nice change, or you may not even notice that that got adjusted. but other folks will hop into New Outlook and say, oh my gosh, I don't want conversation view. It doesn't work for me. So I will show you how to adjust that shortly. Then you have your reading pane over here on the right. Much like Classic Outlook, you can reorganize how this is laid out. So if you prefer your reading pane to be on a different area of your screen, you can adjust that as well. And then at the top, you've got this toolbar. It's functioning the same as the ribbon in Classic Outlook. The difference is in the look and feel. They've really slimmed down on a lot of the tools that are just visible by default. And you've got these basic options that you can kind of flip around between. So you'll notice that the icons are not really labeled by default. They're smaller, it's more compact. Again, this is kind of a matter of preference. Some folks really like that compact view. Some folks want a more traditional ribbon. That's an easy one to adjust, actually, if you do want a more traditional ribbon. You can click this little arrow. It's sort of to the bottom right of the ribbon. It clicks up and down. So with the new Outlook ribbon, you'll see it just these little icons. And I apologize, it is kind of a small little button, but it essentially allows you to almost like drop the ribbon and make it bigger. So if you hover over it, it says switch layouts. I'll click on it. And that gives me more buttons that might look familiar to me. This is kind of how the classic Outlook ribbon is set up. In addition, my tools are labeled. So if you like to read the tool that you're about to click and the icons aren't really working for you, that can be a good adjustment to make. So now that we've talked about some of the basics of New Outlook and how it's different from the traditional experience, let's talk about how to customize the experience. This is where you can make New Outlook feel more familiar to the version of Outlook that you are used to. If you have switched over with me and toggled New Outlook on, this is a good point to follow along and kind of adjust some things as we go. We're going to start off with some options under setting and email. Now, the first thing I do want to mention is conversation view. This is what's going to control whether your messages are grouped together into kind of those back and forth threads, or if they are shown individually. So right now I do have conversation view on. You can see if I click the little arrow next to one of my emails that's in a conversation view, it will expand out and show that back and forth, reply and send. And that's what I mean when I say conversation view. If you would like to turn this off, you can do so. You would click into your settings gear icon, select mail here on the left, and we're going to click on layout. So mail, layout. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down. There is a section here for message organization, and it says, how do you want your message list organized? You can group messages by conversation, group messages by branches within conversation, or do not group messages. So I'll go ahead and do that, switch it over to do not group messages. And now those are all split up by our individual messages. So that's a pretty quick and easy fix there under settings. If you go back into that view where you click on the settings gear and then click on mail, there are a fair bit of options here under the layout section. You can choose if you want things large or small. So you've got your different font sizes and you've got your different message heights. So I do feel like you can come in and kind of explore that here. Some of those settings are still available through the ribbon. So for example, if you're here up at the top, you can still click on View and make these adjustments here. Now, one thing you also may want to adjust is the density of your message list. I've heard feedback from folks that when they switch over to New Outlook, one of the kind of frustrating things that they'll say is, oh my gosh, I can only see like 3 emails, right? At one time. This is not compact. It's taking up a lot of space on my screen. So if you are here in your view area, right, we've selected view up at the top. There is a drop down for density, roomy, cozy, and compact. So I think cozy, there you go, just tightens it up a little bit, whereas compact makes it much smaller. So you can kind of get those items shrink down a little bit, can fit more of them on your screen. Similarly, there is a message preview. Right now it is showing that preview text and kind of giving me a hint as to what's going on in there. I can hide that preview text. Oops. Oh, well, it's not really adjusting for me, but usually that will make it even more compact. So feel free to adjust your view settings there for your inbox. Play around with it a little bit. One of the other pieces I'll kind of mention before I move on from our settings is this focused and other. You'll see this in classic Outlook as well. So this is not specific to new Outlook, but it is good to mention is that they have started sort of splitting your emails into focused and other. So you can toggle back and forth here up at the top. The idea is to, I think, try to kind of pull spam out or like marketing messages so they're not getting mixed in with your regular stuff. Me personally, I want to be able to see everything. So if you want to be able to adjust that focused or other, you can adjust that setting as well. I believe it's back here again in the settings gear icon, mail, layout, and it says, do you want Outlook to sort your email? So it's usually by default turned on into focused and other. I'm going to say, hey, don't sort my messages. I need to see everything. I don't want to have to go between different tabs, right? And I'll click save. Alrighty. So we've talked about adjusting some of our view settings. We've talked about how navigation is a bit different in new Outlook. We've also looked at a handful of customization options for turning off conversation view, adjusting where items are displayed. One other kind of critical one here under the View tab is, of course, your reading pane. So some folks prefer it on the bottom of the screen instead of the right. So you can click this drop down here for the reading pane and kind of move where that is appearing on your screen. And this can be nice to kind of recreate your classic Outlook experience here in New Outlook and give you a layout that you're more familiar with. So feel free to play around with that as well. Let's see here. One thing that is kind of convenient in New Outlook, and I'm actually going to switch back over to my reading pane being on the right. One thing that's kind of convenient about New Outlook is that they have these hover over icons. And so you can kind of just take your cursor, come over a specific document, or excuse me, a specific email, And you can see there's options for flagging and for pinning. Um, you can also right click on an email and see a bunch of the tools there. Again, kind of similar to your classic Outlook. So you do have some options. One thing that you can do that is exclusive to new Outlook that I've played around with and I kind of like is this pin feature. So let's say you have a conversation or a message that is really important and you don't want it to get lost in your inbox because you just get, kind of inundated with emails during the day. Traditionally, we would use flags, right? And it kind of helps it be more visible in your message list. And flagging is still available here, but this pinning is new. So I'm going to go ahead and click on pin. And now, up at the top of my message list, there is a section for pinned messages. So even as I go through my day and the flood of emails keep coming, I can kind of have this up top of mind so I can follow up on it if needed. I can review that information. If maybe it's a long email, it's going to take me some time to get through and reply. So that can be kind of a cool feature as well, is putting it up there at the top. I do see a question in the chat. So we use NetDocuments for document management. We use your firm for the conversion from WorldDocs to NetDocs. What can you tell us about the steps needed to get ND Office to coordinate with new Outlook? So that's a great question. If you are using um, NetDocuments, there is a tool that works with new Outlook, and this is an important distinction actually because one of the differences between old Outlook, I'm sorry, I really got to stop saying that, classic Outlook and new Outlook is how it works in the background and what tools can connect to either of those. Really, at the base of it, new Outlook is what they traditionally had in your web version of Outlook. It's a little bit more cloud-based. It's not as based on your computer. Really what that means in practice, and especially for this NetDocuments question, is that some of your add-ins that may have worked in your classic Outlook either are not going to be available for new Outlook yet, or they're going to look different in the way that NetDocuments does. So if you need to be able to get to your NetDocuments tools in Outlook, you will need to utilize what we call the M365 panel. So you can reach out to your IT team or to NetDocuments about, getting this particular add-in tool. If you're on NetDocuments, it's available to you. It's not a paid tool or anything like that, but you may need some assistance getting it added to your new Outlook experience. And if you select an email message in the list, you can grab this light blue NetDocuments logo, and that pops out this M365 panel on the right side of the screen. So this is what you're going to use to file your emails, to work with your attachments. And you do have to use the M365 add-in for NetDocuments here in New Outlook. So the traditional end email add-in is not going to work. And that's something that you may see with this tool and with other tools as well, and that you may have to make some adjustments into those integrations between Outlook because the way that it's built in the background is different. So if you need to add that, you can try coming into more apps here. Usually it's in the ribbon somewhere along the way. I'll click on more apps and you can add apps here. And so you could come and search for net documents or for whatever app it was that you wanted. I have this convenient little section that says built for your org. So these are things that have been specifically approved or selected by my organization. And really, folks, this is kind of one of the ways that Microsoft is moving into the future and with what we call their cloud-based kind of experience, is that there are these different apps that you can add into Outlook, Teams, a lot of those different tools to interact with other applications as you're working. So this is another thing you could come in, search for some tools that you frequently use, maybe even, connections or add-ins that you had that you're not seeing come over from Classic Outlook, and see if there's an application here in New Outlook that supports some of those same features. So to go back to your original question, William, if you do need that Net Documents add-in, feel free to come in and search for it in the More Apps section, um, and look for, let's see how it pops up if I search for Net Documents. So I believe it's here, Net Documents for Outlook. Oh, there's a couple. Yeah, I think it's this one. It just says Net Documents, and you can click on that to add it. Another question in the chat. Will Microsoft phase out Classic Outlook and require the use of New Outlook at some point? Is there already a timeline for this conversion that you're aware of? They have been saying that for a while, is that they're going to retire Classic Outlook and kind of make this push towards New Outlook. In my personal experience, they've been saying that for a while. We haven't really seen that hard push because not all of those tools are supported in New Outlook yet, specifically a lot of the add-in tools. So until other companies, right, the people that built the original kind of connectors between Outlook and whatever their software is, are playing catch up right now a little bit. They're trying to create these new tools and these new add-ins that will function in New Outlook, and not everyone has done that yet. So Microsoft is not going to force everyone off of Classic Outlook into New Outlook if they can't support all of the same features and connectivity, because they can't really mess up somebody's workflow, right? Like, let's say you had, I don't know, a research tool that you used in Outlook, and that research tool does not have a comparable add-in in New Outlook. I find, it's my personal experience, that I think that there's some hesitation for folks to move over, and therefore for Outlook to force us to move over because of all of those kind of tools and different pieces of software playing catch up to build out their new Outlook tool. So we're lucky in that Net Documents does have that tool built out. They kind of jumped on that bandwagon a while ago. But you may have to explore some of your other tools if you have things that you use frequently. All righty. Moving right along, let's talk about some of our email tools and things that may be able to save you a little bit of time. In terms of your basic workflow here, a lot of the options are the same. You're opening a message, reading it, responding to it. One of the things that, people get a little bit thrown off by is, again, these icons and the way things are laid out. So let's say that I am getting ready to respond to this email. I have the little reply icon here. There's a little react, which is kind of fun. You can like send a happy face or a heart or whatever for a message. There's also applications here as well. So if there are certain tools that you could use on this particular message. You'll see some of the applications as well, and additional actions if you click the ellipsis button here on the right. Now you can customize these actions. This is one of those customization pieces that sometimes can help folks, make that transition and get to the tools they want. So I'm going to click on Customize Actions here. And again, if you are clicking along with me, I just simply have an email message selected. I'm going to click the little ellipsis button here and say Customize Actions. And you can choose what you want to show up at the top of that email. So different people want different things, right? I'm going to go ahead and say I want delete. I want mark as unread up there. And it is showing me a little preview so I can see what it's going to look like. I can, have any of these others of how I want to send, I want to print. And then over here on the right, we do have those apps. So maybe, one of the apps I want is send to OneNote because I use OneNote heavily to kind of just do my day-to-day work. So that's going to be a nice little connector for me. So you'll go ahead, you'll customize that and click Save. And that gives you more of the tools that you use frequently just up there at the top, easy to get to. So I can read through the message, make my decision, and then head up to these little shortcuts to take the action that I need to take. So again, that was there under More Actions if you hit the little ellipsis, and then Customize Actions. Now, let's say I go to reply to this message. It's going to give me an inline reply kind of here in the reading pane. You can still do a pop out if you want to. I personally like the pop out. So if you want to kind of have it appear in its own window for you to work on it, there is an icon here that looks like a little arrow to the upper right. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that to pop my email out. And then it becomes its own standalone message. So instead of having to, work inside the reading pane, I get a little bit more real estate here. And again, it can kind of match the experience that you're used to in classic Outlook. Attachments do work pretty much the same way. You've got attaching options here, your little paperclip icon, and you can choose if you want to grab from your computer, if you want to grab from, the OneDrive cloud. So you have different ways to give people those attachments. And then, of course, if you are using like a NetDocuments tool, you can add attachments from here if desired. So the share view grabs your attachments here in the NetDocuments add-on so that you can include that in your outgoing email as well. So still a good number of ways to get to those files that you may need to send out. Another feature that's kind of cool that's only available here in New Outlook is a handy feature called Undo Send. So if you've ever hit send and then the second that you hit send, you see a typo or you realize that you sent it to the wrong person, right? And you want the email back, that's where Undo Send can come in and kind of make your life a little bit easier. It gives you a short little delay window after you've sent that message so that you can catch those mistakes. Why is it that you always see the typo as the message is like floating off into the, world, and you just have to be like, oh, I spelled their name wrong or whatever it is. So how do we turn on undo send? We're going to come into our settings, again, using that settings gear icon. We'll use our mail settings, and let me expand this out a little bit. And then this is under compose and reply. So settings, mail, compose and reply. Scroll down a little bit. We just talked about pop out. So if you always want a new pop out when you click reply, you can also set that up here and say, just give me pop out every single time. And then here's undo send. So it tells us you can cancel an email message after you've selected send. To cancel, click the undo button that appears at the bottom of your screen. Use the slider to adjust how long you have to cancel your messages. So I'm going to give myself, oh, it goes up pretty far. We'll just do 10 seconds and I'll click save. So now that undo send feature is enabled. Let's try it out. I wonder if this will work because I already had this open. Sending, and it's got undo at the bottom. So I think this is going to hang out for 10 seconds. And then if I say, oh my gosh, undo, it doesn't send it. And it's got it here. So let's say, I send it. I realize I left something out, or I forgot to attach something, or I forgot the person was going. This is where it's at, down at the bottom. So it looks like that hangs out for however the amount of time that I set was. If you just need a couple seconds, that's fine. If you need a lot longer, it's going to linger there at the bottom. But it's a pretty cool little feature because I think we've probably all had a moment where we're just like, oh, I want it to come back. And, you don't have that option. So again, in New Outlook, you do have that option. Kind of a cool little tool. So settings, mail, compose and reply. And then if you scroll down a little bit, it's going to be under undo send. There is a feature called snooze that is new to New Outlook. So if you have a message selected, you can click the snooze button here up where it says tags, and it'll kind of tell you when you want to snooze it to. And so you can say when you want to kind of take a look at it and make your selection there. Let's see, if I click later today, it looks like it cleans it up for my inbox for a minute until I decide I want to go back in and take a look at it again. So let's see. So let's say this message comes in for me. I need to deal with it, but I can't deal with it right now because I'm drowning in other stuff. So I'm going to click snooze till tomorrow. Yep. And so it kind of removes it from the list so that you, again, can kind of look at what it is that you want to focus on. And then there is a snoozed folder here on the left. So if I go ahead and I snooze an email and then I think, well, now I have time. Now I want to deal with it, right? I can come back over here into snoozed and it has those emails. So that's pretty cool. Handful of other tips I wanted to mention. There is a tool called Sweep. This is going to be kind of a cleanup tool. If you're getting a lot of the same messages from a specific sender, it gives you a faster way to move or delete those items in bulk. So I get a lot of these document submission confirmations, and I don't really have to do anything with them. They just come and, fill up my inbox. So I can click sweep here. It brings up a dialog box for me to make some selections. So this is kind of like rules light. You can still use rules in New Outlook. In fact, you haven't always been able to use rules in New Outlook, but they they pushed that functionality recently, so it's now available. But sweep messages is almost kind of like rules, but without as much kind of manual input. So it says for messages from this specific person, do you want to move all of their messages from the inbox folder? You can move all of their messages and any future messages if I know that those document submission confirmations are just going to keep coming. I could do that. Some additional options, and you can choose where you want to move them as well. So the nature of sweep is cleanup, right? So it defaults to deleted items. But you don't have to put in deleted items. You have other folders, you have an archive, so you could make those selections. So just kind of a nice cleanup feature. Let me see. I don't want to clean up my own emails because that would be like everything. Let's try this one. So sweep, move all messages from the inbox folder. And I'm going to say any future messages as well, because this just kind of sends me stuff that's not as relevant to me. So I'll click OK. It says success. All future messages from the sender you specified will be moved. We're working on cleaning up your mailbox. So you can go in, you can view additional rules for cleanup. This will show you that rule. So it's a nice way to kind of create those cleanup rules if you have that junk, you know. I will say these days, I find that between my email filter, my spam filter, I don't get a ton of junk, but you may be sitting at your desk laughing like, oh, it must be nice to not get all that stuff. So you can definitely set up those rules, those sweeps here in New Outlook as well. Now, one thing that I have noticed, especially I was getting ready for this course and I was trying to kind of, designate what's the difference between new Outlook and old Outlook, is that Microsoft is making efforts to make that transition a little bit smoother. And one of the ways that they're doing that is by bringing some of the tools that were available in new Outlook into classic Outlook. So there are certain things that you may have seen appear in your classic Outlook environment, that weren't there before that you can continue to use here in New Outlook, and kind of enhance your experience. So one of the things is at mentions. These have become more and more popular as folks are getting more comfortable with things like using at mentions in Teams or using at mentions in the comments on their Word files. You can also do the at mentions here in Outlook as well. So what I mean by an at mention is when you click the at symbol, or pardon me, type the at symbol when you're composing an email, and it allows you to essentially tag a specific person. Now, when you tag that person, it puts their tag in the email itself and it adds them to the recipient list. So how this traditionally works for me, when I've used the at mentions before, is I'll be going in, I'll create a long email. Let's see if this works. And, this is a wall of text. Maybe it's all important. I would never send an email this long, but um, I really need my colleague Dwayne to take a look at this specific section of this wall of text. So I'm going to come in and tag him here. I am going to tag another one of my colleagues for an action item that she needs to complete. So I'll do an at mention and a tag. And what's cool about this, I wonder if I can do it for myself, is that when these recipients get these messages in their inbox, it's going to have a little indicator next to the message that they have been tagged. So it's a nice visual cue for the other person in their inbox to be able to see that they're being referenced. So there's that little, I tagged myself, so you can see there's a little at symbol kind of in the upper right of that message here. and that's showing up. So if I click on it, this is what the at mention looks like in the actual body of the message. So my colleagues aren't highlighted, right? These aren't my tags. They're for Dwayne and for Kim. But I do have a nice little highlight here. So I think we've all experienced, when you go into an email and it's just a ton of information, you're like, well, what about this is relevant to me? If you're composing your emails and you're using those tags, you're making it really easy for people to see what part of the email is about them, what part needs their attention or has been assigned to them, that sort of thing. Question in the chat, if you tag someone and they aren't using New Outlook, will it still be highlighted? So the tags do work in Classic Outlook as well. That's one of those features that they kind of brought from New Outlook to Classic to bridge that gap. So it should work whether or not your recipient is using New or Classic. I do want to take a second, take a look at our calendar options. So you can jump over to your calendar using the icon in the left. I would say the same thing here about, expanding your ribbon if you haven't done so, just to get some additional tools. A lot of this is going to look fairly similar to what you saw in Classic Outlook, in that you can come over here, you can create a new event. You can just kind of give you that little tooltip, select the amount of time that you want to use for that event, and then begin typing. So let's see. Call this touch base about budget. So that's a nice kind of tool that if you just sort of click in, you begin typing, it'll kind of pop up and it'll be there until you're ready to continue working on it. You can click on it and it will open up the window so you can go in and send it out to folks, that sort of thing. This view for coming in and creating calendar invitations is similar to the same one that you would have seen in your browser version of Outlook or in the Teams area, or excuse me, the calendar area inside of Teams. So in that way, it's going to be consistent across those different applications. Just like, before you would come in, you would add your attendees. It still gives you the scheduling assistant if you're used to using the scheduling assistant traditionally. There is an open scheduler kind of tool here. And one of the nicest options is the ability to just toggle on and off that you want this to be a Teams meeting. So if you have this toggled on, when you create this invite, it is going to add that Teams information in there. And you can adjust your meeting options with this little settings gear icon. So this gives you different options for creating those Teams meetings as you're kind of generating the calendar invitation. Another thing that's kind of nice is it'll show you here on the right, who's been invited. It's going to show you the calendar and you can kind of see where it is that you're placing that new invite. Just a nice little kind of, visual update to how the new calendar invitation item looks. We are running a little bit low on time. I did want to point out the search up at the top as well. They have enhanced the search a bit here in New Outlook to make it more of what we call a Google-like search. So, I think a lot of us have had stressors or problems with search in classic Outlook. And it does run a little bit smoother here in Outlook, I have noticed. I can get kind of better results. So if I just come up here to the search and I begin typing, it starts to bring up my results. Oh, gotta spell things right. So it's showing me, I have some documents that are popping up. There are some messages, and you can kind of browse between, am I looking for a file? Am I looking for a particular individual? So let me try. If I come over to people, I type in a name, I get all of these different contacts that I may need to use. You can also choose here on the left side of the search if you want to search all folders, your current folder, your subfolders, and you can kind of set the scope there. There's also this filter option on the far right of the search bar, and that allows you to build out kind of a more advanced search. You can enter in multiple criteria for your search, and it's just pretty quick and convenient right there beneath the initial search bar. Now I'll go ahead and pause there and open up the floor for questions. If you'd like, you can share something that feels a little different in New Outlook or anything that maybe you haven't been able to find, and we can take a look. Okay. Feel free to continue to drop questions in the chat. I'm just going to do a little bit of wrap up stuff. So folks, I know that there is some resistance to New Outlook. It's easy to want to stay on what you're used to, what's familiar to you. That being said, I hope that, today exploring New Outlook, you've started to see some of the options that can be beneficial to you here, and, ways that you may want to kind of make that transition. Now, honestly, one of my favorite things about this whole New Outlook, classic Outlook experience is the ability to switch back when needed. So what I did when I initially kind of made my transition to New Outlook was that I worked in classic Outlook. Most of the time I toggled into New Outlook here and there until I was like, oh, I kind of get what's going on. And then if there were certain tools that were only available to me in old Outlook, or if I couldn't find something and I just wanted to go back to what I knew, I would just kind of toggle it off. So, you don't always have to just make the plunge, right? Move totally into New Outlook and just hope it goes okay. Feel free to kind of switch back and forth, figure out what you like, what you don't like. One thing that I like is I just feel like it's a little bit less cluttered. And for some folks, that initial jump is, oh, I don't have all the tools that I need, right? I'm not seeing a bunch of the things that I used to have. But as you make that transition, you realize those tools, those features are still there. You just have to kind of, look for them a little bit, maybe under your settings, or digging into some of your menus. But it is nice that when you're just going through your kind of day-to-day workflow, it's not quite as busy on the eye, I find, as classic Outlook. So just my personal take on having made that transition recently. Alrighty, I'm not seeing any additional questions in the chat, so we'll go ahead and put a end on that. Question in the chat, will this video be available for sharing? I'm not 100% sure. I'll have to check with my internal team, but we do have everyone's, email address. So if we do end up distributing the recording, we can send it to y'all. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time and attention. I recognize a lot of the names in the chat, so it's nice to see y'all again. And I hope you have a good one. Thanks so much.